We do not agree with this decision, and respectfully, we will be appealing it.
Last week, Federal Court of Canada Justice Richard Mosley may have saved the country. Mosley is the judge who ruled that the Liberals' invocation of the Emergencies Act against the Freedom Convoy in February of 2022 was unconstitutional, and it was. The government can't just decide on its own that it needs to use the biggest hammer in the federal arsenal on ordinary citizens. And that's basically what Mosley's decision has made more difficult next time. And that's what saved us. Now, Mosley said there was a lot going on in the convoy that was illegal. You can't trespass. You can't impede the traffic. You can't keep people from operating their businesses or going to their employment. And all of that was being made much more difficult by the convoy. You can't have excess noise. And they sat there for 3 weeks honking their horns. But Mosley said all of those can be dealt with by the local and provincial authorities. And the Emergencies Act specifically says Ottawa may not invoke the act unless the emergency is national. Mosley said this wasn't. It was only in 3 locations. It was at the Ambassador Bridge between Windsor and Detroit. It was at the Coots border crossing in Alberta. And it was mostly in downtown Ottawa. So it wasn't a national emergency. And even if it is a national emergency, the Emergencies Act is only justified when there is no other law that can be used to deal with the threat. When the provinces are incapable of dealing with it. So the federal government has to deal with it, and it doesn't have any other law in order to stop the threat to national security. Well, the protest in Ottawa never rose to that level. In Coots, in southern Alberta, there were 4 people arrested who had weapons and modified and explosive devices who said they might kill police officers, and that's awful. That's not a national emergency. It's not a threat to the national security. And so Mosley was right. The federal government used an elephant gun to kill a mosquito. A really bad, nasty batch of wasps and hornets, but they overused the Emergencies Act. And he's absolutely right about that. But how did that save the country? Because what it does is it tells future governments, and I hope it tells this government too, but this government doesn't listen to anything. I hope it tells future governments, though, that they are not above the law. When they get into an inconvenient position, which is politically damaging to them, they can't suspend civil rights across the country. They can't invoke the Emergencies Act. They can't freeze people's bank accounts just because that's easier for them. On the morning of the invocation of the Emergencies Act in February 14th, 2022, the RCMP said, look, we haven't tried all the police actions yet that might end this blockade. That in itself should have told the government they didn't have the constitutional authority to go ahead with the Emergencies Act. The premiers in a conference call before the Emergencies Act was invoked said, no, Mr. Prime Minister, I don't think you need the Emergencies Act. We should be dealing with this at the local or provincial level. That's what made this unconstitutional. But that's also what is undermining people's faith in institutions, is that the federal government, this particular federal government, when it doesn't get its way, likes to use very arbitrary means against the people who oppose it. And that's what Justice Richard Mosley saved us from. For Post Media, I'm Lorne Gunter.
Well, That is a good encapsulation of what we're going to be talking about today.
That is. So almost a year ago to the date. This week is like a week of anniversaries right now, what we've been dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the J6 anniversary, another 2 more weeks, and we'll have the Freedom Convoy anniversary. And obviously, almost a year ago, Judge Mosley's anniversary to his verdict on the Emergencies Act. So it's a week of anniversary shows, I think. That's our theme this week.
I guess so. Well, leading up to the 1-year anniversary of the convoy, for sure. The judge said that the Emergencies Measures Act, the rollout was illegal, and judges something we didn't know already. So that, of course, has now sparked lawsuits and debates. And let's not even get into the dirty deeds that they pulled during the convoy, like publicizing the Give, Send, Go list, and you having CBC like dox people. I mean, it was just egregious. So many different things. So we have a couple guests on to talk about this new it's a lawsuit. It's a lawsuit by several people against several defendants.
Well, we had one of the guests on about 5 months ago with Eddie Cornell talking about the lawsuit, and Vincent Gerses will be back with us tonight with another applicant of the lawsuit to give us some updates of where they're at, where they're going, what are the fundraising goals? Have they been met? And how we can help them meet those goals, and why this lawsuit is so pertinent and important for Canadians to get on board with.
So without further ado, old friend, welcome back to the show, Vincent Gerses, and a very new friend. This is her very first podcast, so we're going to take it very easy on her. Please welcome Carrie to the show. Hello, welcome.
Welcome back, Vincent.
It's always great to be back here.
Yeah, you're
it's
almost
a fun place.
Go ahead, sorry.
It's a fun place.
Well, challenge accepted. You're almost one of our most recurring guests at this point, so you are right up there with a couple other guests. So we're gonna have to get you a special coat, I think.
I think so.
So let's just start with introductions. Talk about who you are, your experience, and then your experience with the convoy, and then what led you to being part of this lawsuit. Vincent, since you're an old pro, do you want to start? Usually ladies first, because we know what a lady is around here. But we'll start with Vincent.
Yeah, I'm like a bad rash. I never really go away. I just keep coming back.
That's okay. We like you.
Okay.
Okay.
So for those guests that maybe don't know my background, I was an OPP officer for 32 years. I retired a few years prior to the Freedom Convoy. And then I did attend Ottawa. I found that something interesting was happening, and I wanted to go check it out for myself. I think a lot of Canadians did that. There was a lot of excitement in the air. We've had enough of the abuse by our abusers. And it was time to go and speak out. And as a result of being there for some time to just help out in any possible way I could, I did not have a truck. I didn't drive a truck. I didn't honk a horn. Not to suggest that that was a bad thing. I think our truckers that did go were heroes, and they should be congratulated for the entirety of what happened there. I take exception. I just wanted to kind of cut in here and take a bit of exception to what Lorne Gunther said at the beginning introduction on this video. He was talking about the government using a sledgehammer to go after mosquitoes. And then he corrected that and said, well, they were more like nasty wasps and hornets. And I definitely do not agree with that. I didn't see any violence when I was there. It was quite euphoric in terms of how wonderful it was there. Wasps and hornets can sting and can cause some blistering and some damage and some pain. And now I understand that some of the citizens in Ottawa took exception to the horn honking and maybe some of the parking, but the trucks did end up parking where they were instructed to park by police. And I'm not thinking that that's a proper analogy, the wasps and the hornets. That's not what I saw there. And certainly, as I had stated in the video I put out about 2 weeks ago, associated to this lawsuit. I didn't. I just didn't understand why my bank accounts were frozen, and to this day, I still don't have an answer for why our bank accounts were frozen. Other than a few times, I got up on a stage in the middle of the day. I was asked to speak, and I spoke out, and I offered my 2 cents worth of the issues that I saw that were happening, and I spoke out against their government. And our constitutional rights and freedoms, our Charter of Rights, doesn't offer us, indicates that these are inalienable rights that we have, that we can speak out. And it's not speech that's threatening, it's not harming, it's not violent, it's not hateful. It's just indicating to the crowd that we do have a Bill of Rights and a Charter of Rights, and that it's being abused. And so for the government to freeze our bank accounts was unconscionable. It really was. And if you get an opportunity to look at some of the videos that our plaintiffs have put out and posted online through Take Action Canada, and they can certainly go to the website takeactioncanada.ca/justice, and they'll see some of the videos that were posted, and Carrie's on one of those videos. And it was life-changing in a very bad way for most of us, all of the plaintiffs. And when we did have an opportunity to finally come together and speak, following the filing of the civil suit, because we didn't all know each other, very few of us knew each other. We heard some of the horror stories from some of the other plaintiffs, and it was quite shocking. It was really, really discouraging, shocking, and hard to believe that we're living in Canada. So that's my introduction to this story, and we can take it from there.
Okay. Well, next we have Carrie. And
I have to follow that.
Your story is very unique, and I'm curious to know how you got to where you're at. So it's actually a very curious story. So I'm really interested in having you share that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, my name's Carrie, and I live in a little village, Scotland, Ontario, and just simple life, right? With my husband, my dog, and we don't want a lot. We just want to live a peaceful life. And that's what we were doing up until recently. I was never at the convoy. I would have loved to have been there, but I was never there. My husband was there, and he started off by saying, I'm going to go for a weekend, which turned into a week, which turned into 2 weeks, which turned into 3 weeks. And which was fine. And it was very interesting to kind of be watching the news and watching the mainstream media, hearing what they were saying, and then getting firsthand knowledge of what was really happening. It was so like 2 different stories. It was crazy. And the one thing that I guess caught my attention was that you have so many people from all different provinces, all different backgrounds, all different ages, all different races, and they all came to this one place. And it was peaceful, and people were laughing and finally enjoying themselves again. And they were it was like Canada, right? Like everybody gets along. It was amazing to see I didn't get to see personally, but seeing on like the different live streams and hearing what my husband was saying to me. And it was crazy because I was fully expecting something different kind of to happen with everybody's emotions being so high. And it was great. So he stayed for the 3 weeks. And then when this whole Emergency Act thing was coming, I was terrified because I didn't know what was going to happen. And you're hearing all these stories. So I was scared for him and for everybody that was there. And I said, you know what, please come home. Please come home. And he didn't want to because he felt like he was abandoning his friends that he had made and the whole cause. Mm-hmm. So he came home, and it was the next day, it was the Friday, that I got a phone call from a friend that said to me, Carrie, have you checked your bank account? And I'm like, no, why would I do that? I didn't even think that something like this could happen. And she's like, well, Peter, who's also one of the plaintiffs, his bank account's frozen. And so I looked, and ours was fine. There was it was like I kept checking through the day, and my friend says, Carrie, you better go get some cash out just in case. I'm like, oh no, you know, things will be fine. Why would they do this to me? My husband's at home. I was never there. We've done nothing wrong. Why would they touch our bank accounts? And well, that evening, that Friday the evening, my husband was sleeping during the day because he was working night shift, and he went into work, and he called me later that evening and said, you know what? You need to check our bank account. And I signed in, and oh my gosh, it was like where my money was gone. Like it was just dashes. There was no access to my savings, no access to my checking, like nothing. And it's like the only way I know how to describe it, the feeling was like being kicked in the stomach, right? Because it was such like, I don't even know. Like it was, you can't even describe how you feel. It was terrifying because it was like all our money and it's gone. And like, I don't know if it's going to be a day, a week, a month. Like I was even thinking like, what if it was never coming back? Like, what if they just, you know, put $200 in and said, here you go. And how do I prove how much I had in there? There was so many questions. And like Vincent said, nobody was giving us any answers. Like nobody told us anything. So, and the thing that's on top of that is my mother-in-law, my father-in-law's bank accounts were also frozen. And they're senior citizens and they weren't there. They didn't donate and they were panicked too. Like they didn't know what was going on. And it's still to this day, they're still, every time something goes a little sideways, they're like, oh my gosh, does it have to do with the bank accounts being froze? Like they're still paranoid to this day because of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I'm really curious here. So your parents, it was your parents or his parents?
His parents, my husband's
parents. So
yes.
His parents, their bank accounts were frozen and they had nothing to do with the convoy. Their son was there and that was it.
Well, and the connection was because he's his name is on their bank accounts just to
as joint out. Bank account owners.
Yeah. So that's why they did it.
That's still shocking to me because I was under the understanding if it was a joint account, they still couldn't touch it because you weren't there and they weren't there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's like our joint account, his with his mom's, him with his dad's, they were all frozen. So now we're thinking like, we've got our mortgage to worry about, their rent to worry about, like, where are we going to get all this money to cover all our bills? Like it was so many things. It was crazy and stressful, like crazy stressful.
So did any of you donate to the convoy? Like how did they get your name? Because you weren't there at all. Your husband was there, but how would they know he was there without, and I'm assuming he's the commonality because he was on your bank account plus on the parents' bank account. So how would they know he was there unless he was charged or donated?
The only thing we can think of is he was there with his vehicle, so they probably took his license plate. That's the only thing we're guessing.
Was his vehicle parked along with the trucks as well?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, well, yeah, because that's still shocking because many people had way heavier involvement in the convoy, and they were out there putting it out that they were fully involved with headquarters and logistics and whatnot, and their accounts weren't frozen; they were left alone. So that's really shocking.
Yeah, and there was people that were there longer than he was, that people that were arrested that we know of, and their bank accounts were never frozen. So we don't know how they chose.
Well, because I was there from the beginning, from January 27th right to March 8th. And I spoke on the stage. I helped run the stage, MC the stage. Plus I was doing stuff at the Swiss Hotel. And I was doing social media posts almost every day. And yet I didn't get frozen. And thankfully I didn't get frozen at that point in time. But so it always amazes me when people say, you know, I was there, but I didn't donate and I didn't speak on the stage and yet I was frozen. It's like, how did they even know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So the Emergency Measures Act gets a glowing pass from Trudeau's buddy, and then an actual judge comes in and says, "Yeah, no, not so much." So that's now deemed like illegal, which was what we all knew right from the get-go. And so now there's this lawsuit. And I know Jody was sort of involved in the beginning and then took off because she wasn't quite,
because my bank account
wasn't frozen. Yeah.
Oh, darn.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, before we go on,
Okay.
how long was your bank accounts frozen for?
Ours was just for the weekend. Now, of course, and it happened to be on a long weekend, right? So we had that extra day and you couldn't call and make any arrangements because everything was closed. So ours went down on the Friday and it was back on the Tuesday after the long weekend.
So for 4 days, you were freaking out.
Yes.
What are we going to do? How are we going to pay our bills? Oh my
Right.
gosh, groceries. Oh my gosh, gas in the car. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Oh, and it was crazy. Like the stress level was like, we were at each other's throats because we were like both stressed. And the sad part, and it just breaks my heart, is my poor dog sensed so much tension that she spent the days underneath our dining room table because she didn't understand, like she felt how stressed we were. So
Right.
yeah, crazy.
And the bank never sent you an email, a notification, and nothing.
Nothing. My husband tried calling, but there was no answers. Nobody knew anything.
Mm-hmm. Vincent, how long was yours frozen for?
Just over a week. So I would say from right around the time of the declaration of the EMA until after the weekend. So it was about a week.
And did you get notification from your bank or any phone calls or anything?
Yeah. I received there was a missed call on my cell phone. It was a message that was left on my phone by the CIBC indicating that the accounts were frozen because they were the RCMP had contacted them and requested to freeze the accounts. And then there was another message left on my phone when the accounts were reactivated by the CIBC indicating that the accounts were reinstated. So, yeah, this was a very, very troubling time for a lot of us. It was very shocking. I know when the Mosley decision had finally come out, and I didn't know which way that was going to go when it finally did. I started reading the report, but it's a 200-page report, and it's not going to be read very quickly. Excuse me. So I started reading it, and as I skimmed through the beginning, I saw a section in there where Mosley had said something relative to my involvement of my cross-examination statement to the Attorney General when I was cross-examined on this submission in the EMA judicial review. And had made some comment about my testimony in that he didn't, I don't remember his exact words, but that he didn't exactly believe my entire testimony. And where I couldn't, I still don't understand what component he's referring to, but I suspect he's referring to the portion of my testimony when I talked about how I felt, when I talked about how it affected me. And I think he's suggesting I'm exaggerating on that I kind of went a little overboard on my stating it. And as I thought about it, I thought, why would I have described it that way? Why would I have described my testimony? Because I had an opportunity to then dig up my testimony and read what I said. Mm-hmm. And I talked about how it was, one of the most traumatic things I've ever experienced. And I think that's what he's referring to as some exaggeration. But I started thinking, why would that sound like an exaggeration? Well, they just froze your account. What's the big deal? Deal with it. And I had to really think about that. Why was it so traumatic? Like, why was it such a big deal? And it was a big deal because, when I grew up as a child, I happened to be a big child. I was like bigger than the other kids around me. So I was one of the big kids. And I was always one of the big kids. I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'4". And I never had problems with kids. I just one of those guys that always looked after myself. And I was a big guy and I never abused my size, but I never was abused. And then I eventually slid into the police service. And every day I went to work, I wore a uniform and I carried a gun. And, didn't really get abused by people in my entire career because I treated people the way I wanted to be treated. And I did gain a lot of respect from the public because I treated people with respect and had good public relationships. But when I realized that I had never been victimized before, and it's not like you get victimized when you're 5 years old, and then 7 years old, and then 12 years old, and then 16 years old. And after a while, you get used to being victimized.
Right.
I hadn't been victimized until this time. And when it happened to a responsible person who saves his money, looks after his finances, looks after his home, looks after his property, looks after his family. When I finally reach a point where you're not able to utilize your funds, you can go through all those plastic cards. They're not going to work. No money's coming out of the machine. You can't pay for anything. And that's become your kind of status quo, your norm. And then all of a sudden you realize, I can't put gas in my car. I can't buy food. I can't pay for my hotel. How am I going to get home? And I do need to get home because now I need to get cash. But, why didn't I think of that before? Well, because I didn't think that they would be coming after me the same way Carrie said, why are they coming after me? So, yeah, all of a sudden you develop vertigo, you go into a spin and you think, I can't believe this is actually happening. Same story, like, how is my mortgage going to get paid? How am I going to pay my utilities? I mean, I have the money there. That's not the issue. The issue is they have prevented me from accessing that. And it goes beyond, I just can't pay my mortgage. It goes, I have been in a digital world. I have been jailed. I've been locked up. Like, you're free to walk around, but it's February. It's minus 20 outside. It's just unbelievable. So anyways, we fast forward to the Mosley decision having come out, and then a quick discussion with our legal counsel about what we're going to do about this. And we really realized that now that the decision has come out, it's timing, right? I didn't expect that decision. And quite frankly, if Justice Mosley was a less than morally, ethically stable individual, Justice Mosley could very easily have carried this over another week before releasing his decision. And then we would be beyond our 2-year time frame in being able to file a civil suit. But Justice Mosley released this like 2 days prior to the timeout. So we had gone through Mosley's decision, and then it's not just a matter of his decision, but finally we're having a discussion with our legal team in great detail. And in that detail of discussion, we come to the realization through the collection of all the evidence that we have is that, yes, we have all been abused, and that not only does Justice Mosley say that the EMA was unlawful, but even within the body of the Emergency Measures Act, it's very clear that the Emergency Measures Act operates pursuant to the Canadian Charter of Rights. It says that right in the Emergency Measures Act. And so this seizing of the bank accounts issue is something that we were then going to proceed with civilly, because even if the Mosley had found the EMA was lawful, it still had to go through judicial process to seize bank accounts. And people need to understand that the RCMP Superintendent Baudouin from the RCMP, who was in charge of financial crimes, who ultimately was the one calling the shots on the freezing of the accounts, and those instructions were coming from above. But ultimately, he acknowledged that there was no utilization of a standard that we refer to as reasonable and probable grounds, and the lower standard of reasonable suspicion, that wasn't used either. They used no standard, and he acknowledged that and said, well, we just kind of made up the rules as we went along on a day-by-day basis. And how did they get to that point? Well, they got to that point because the National Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, Jody Thomas, who was receiving daily briefings, daily federal and provincial briefings from police services and intelligence agencies on what's going on, clearly was not happy with the information that she was receiving that wasn't giving her what the government wanted or needed to freeze the bank accounts. So Jody, what she did was essentially create her own intelligence file, and we'll call that the Jody Wilson open source intelligence file. So she would kind of log into the internet, I suppose, and go to the CBC stories and tune into the Canadian Anti-Hate Network and hear what they're saying, and then present that information to the Prime Minister. If you can imagine now, you're disregarding about 5 federal intelligence agencies that are telling you that you don't have the authority to do that, and there's really not a problem. It's not as bad as you think it is. You know, these people are not violent. You know, the city's not on fire. There's no destruction. It seems to be one big party. Well, Jody Thomas is going to have a lot of explaining to do. And
yeah. I mean, just going back to, for me, I mean, just hypothetically, obviously I wasn't there and this never happened to me. I would be more concerned about the connotation with it, because only terrorists have their bank accounts frozen and seized, and massive criminals. And that would be more concerning to me, is that they can label somebody something to the degree of, you know, seizing everything and throwing them in jail without any judicial process. And that was the bigger issue for me. I mean, money, you know, the money came back obviously with everybody. Jody and I take our own advice, and we don't use banks anymore for a lot of that reason. But that would be the big thing, is that they can label you as serious as a terrorist with no proof, with the stroke of a pen. And like you said, it had become abundantly clear that the MPs are absolutely ignorant, very uneducated, and they get all their news from the CBC, which is manufactured by basically the PR branch of the Liberals. So, yeah, so it's not a good situation.
Yeah, no trial, no hearing, no nothing.
Right.
And in your case, Carrie, maybe somebody borrowed your vehicle to go down there, right? Exactly. There was no proof that it was even you or your husband there. Yes. You didn't donate. You didn't speak on a stage. You weren't in any meetings. You didn't represent as a convoy leader. You weren't in any of the social medias that were put out by the Freedom Convoy leader, so to speak. So at the end of the day, you may have just been a really great friend and lent your car to somebody who went down.
True.
And, right? Because there was no proof. They had zero evidence against you other than a license plate.
Yes.
And your bank account was seized. And this is why this lawsuit is so important, because with no evidence other than a license plate that belonged to you, you lost your bank accounts for 4 days. It could have been longer, and thankfully it wasn't.
Yeah.
But for 4 days. Vincent, did you donate to the convoy?
I did make a preliminary donation on the first crowdfunding that went around. It was eventually frozen, and then they reversed the payments and paid everybody back. And then it shifted to Give, Send, Go, I believe. For the second one, and I didn't make any payment afterwards, because I was of the opinion that one was going to get frozen as well.
Yes.
So technically speaking, they didn't really have any evidence against you either, because it was the second
ultimately
that went out, wasn't it?
Yeah, ultimately it wouldn't matter if you're donating to the cause, because you know there is no connection to this event that is of any criminal nature whatsoever. So, you know, it's not like, oh, they're going there to burn down the building, let me buy some fuel to burn down the building. No, this was bunch of trucks are going, and hey, we can use some money to help fund, get us there and pay for our gas and pay for some food. So sure, you're not supporting a criminal activity at that time when you're making that payment. This is all the status of your mind when you're making these payments. Is there evidence to suggest you're paying a criminal organization or not? And clearly there was not. So yeah, it's even just thinking about it now, rehashing it, it's been 3 years since that happened, and it's been 1 year since the Mosley decision came out. And while we're on the subject of that, I believe it's this February 5th and 6th that the appeal that has been filed by the federal government, the Emergency Measures Act judicial review appeal, will be in Osgoode Hall at the Appeals Court in Toronto this February 5th and 6th to be heard again on this appeal. So we're coming up to another anniversary date of that. And again, it's going to be back in court. And again, we will be awaiting a decision. And again, our legal team is going there. A number of legal teams are actually going there to dispute this appeal. And we'll wait and see what happens on this appeal. But regardless of the outcome of the appeal, we are still proceeding ahead with this civil suit against those involved because it's still very much applicable. So we will be continuing on with that. And I think it's important, the entire statement of claim is available at takeactioncanada.ca/justice. You can find the statement of claim. And I'll say it's a very interesting read. It's really worth your time to dig through and read that statement of claim because it covers in detail every individual who was involved, why they were, why they are involved in this suit, what happened to them, and it's quite heart-wrenching when you read the specifics in what the individuals have done. And so the people that are being sued, the defendants that are being sued, I'm just going to go through this list quickly, but I think people would be interested in hearing the names, are Justin Trudeau in his personal capacity, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, David Lametti, Dominic LeBlanc, Bill Blair, Marco Mendicino, the Attorney General of Canada, Jody Thomas, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Denis Baudouin, he's the superintendent from the RCMP that froze the accounts, Brenda Lucky, the former commissioner of the RCMP, Steve Bell, Robert Bernier, the Ottawa Police Service Board, the Ottawa Police Service, the Toronto Dominion Bank, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, the Bank of Montreal, the National Bank of Canada, the Royal Bank of Canada, Bank of Nova Scotia, also known as Scotiabank, Canadian Tire Services Limited, doing business as Canadian Tire Bank, Meridian Credit Union, Assiniboine Credit Union, Gulf and Fraser Credit Union, Stride Credit Union, Simply Financial Credit Union, and what we refer to as ABC Corp and John Doe, which means that there is the possibility that additional names and entities will be added to this suit. So right now, at this point, where is it at? It's waiting for the statement of defense from the other side to be submitted.
Wow.
So how long does the defense have to file their statement of defense?
I don't know. That's a question that our legal team is going to be able to answer to us. I suspect it should be filed very, very soon because, I don't know the exact date. But we're going to be in conference with our legal team, I believe, in the next week or two. They've indicated we're going to have conference just prior to them going in on this fight.
So what was interesting when you were naming all of the applicants? So the federal government of Canada is not named. Therefore, the taxpayers are not on the hook to cover the defense of any of these people. So you are not suing the taxpayers. If you win this case, it is not coming from the taxpayer coffers. It's actually coming from the personal pockets of Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one reason why people should get behind this, because it will actually hurt the individual people not the taxpayers. But the other thing that I was, because I hadn't known which banks, I knew all the major banks, the 5 major banks were involved in freezing accounts, but I didn't know that credit unions were involved. And so many people think that their money is safe in credit unions. And I'm hearing people all the time when we say, take your money out of the bank, protect your funds, they're going, oh, but credit unions are safe. We should, and we keep saying, well, not necessarily. You should investigate who owns your credit unions, because it might not be who you think. And the credit unions, a lot of them now do fall under the Federal Bank Act. And so there you are, you're proving the point right there. Credit unions were involved in the illegal seizure of assets or freezing of assets. That's blowing my mind.
Right. Now, just so you understand, there are more financial institutions involved than what is listed here, because the list represents the financial institutions responsible for the freezing accounts of the 20 plaintiffs. Okay,
Right.
so that's kind of a summary of the accounts of the banks or financial institutions that we used. But there's also another civil suit that has been filed where a number of other individuals involved. So I believe Tamara Leach and Daniel Bulford and Tom Marazzo are, involved in a similar suit, utilizing a different legal team, and may have different financial institutions involved. And keeping in mind that close to 300 Canadians had their bank accounts frozen. So that's going to actually indicate that there are quite a few other financial institutions involved, not in this suit, but they may be involved in one of the other one or two suits. And although there are, at least that I know of, that are 2 or 3 different suits, ours is the largest. And ultimately, when this finally goes to trial, eventually, they won't be dealt with individually or separately. They'll all be conglomerated together as one big suit going forward.
Okay.
So, Carrie, have you changed banks since then?
You know what? No, I know. We've thought about it, and I did the whole thing, the credit union. Let's do that. That's safer, but I don't know. What do you do? I can say we do keep cash at home now.
Yeah.
Learned your lesson that much.
Right. Yeah, if we all stopped using banks tomorrow, this whole thing would be over. Because as you saw, it was all about the money, wasn't it? It was about defunding this whole movement. They froze the first account, they seized the second account, and that money still sits in escrow today, being protected by Give, Send, Go until we can get it to the right people. So it's all, we have to get in mind that this is all about defunding the freedom movement. That was always what it was about, and we have to get our heads wrapped around that, and we have to take proper precautions for that. I mean, we could just do this show, we could just title this show what's coming down the pipe, CBDCs and digital ID, but let's stick to the story at hand. Yeah, exactly. Right. But what a great lesson to learn early, right, and prepare yourself, right? So
Never thought.
Right. And so I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to see the new documentary that had just come out on central bank digital currency called The End of Cash.
No, not yet. No.
Okay. So I was actually featured in that documentary because my bank accounts were frozen.
Wow.
And I will provide you with a link to it. And if you want, you can share it out with your audience. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We will do that. It is the looming danger of our time. Yeah. Well, not only that, just totally off topic. They're also tying the water board, the global water board, in with international banking, which means they're going to tie water in with banking as well. So we have big problems coming down the pipe. So, so now you can maybe put your heads to what you've learned and help us save the water too.
So, Carrie, what made your husband decide to go and be a part of the Freedom Convoy, and what made you decide to stay home? Besides your dog.
Yeah. I think it was for us, like, just over when the whole COVID thing started, there was so much going on. Like, we weren't into politics. Like, we didn't talk politics. We had nothing to do with politics. And then when the COVID thing came about, we're like, something's not right here. So you start questioning, you start researching. You're like, well, maybe we should have been paying attention, right? Because we learned a lot. But you see so many horror stories. We started to hear so many awful stories about, like just losing family members and losing friendships over how the government pinned the vaccinated against the unvaxxed. And, you see the elderly lonely and just all the horror stories. It was hard to take. And we're like, well, what can we do? And my husband's like, I have to do something. And then this came about and I was like, perfect, right? Like this is something that he can physically do to feel like he's making a difference.
Right.
So he decided he wanted to go. And, I had the dog and just work. So I thought, I'll stay back. But it was also supposed to be for a weekend, right? Like it was. Kind of. And then I was going to go and then we were going to go the weekend. But then that's when everything went sideways. And we had people there saying, you know what, you're best to just stay put, not to come. Maybe it would be better if everybody had. That might have been the time where everybody should have went to support. But we're like, yeah, we better just stay. So I didn't get to experience it. So it's like, it's a little bit sad for me that I didn't get to feel that feeling that everybody there had.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think you nailed it. A lot of people have felt the same thing. This is the first time they can actually get involved and it is making a difference. And I think that was exciting for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody was happy again. It was nice to see smiling faces and actually see faces, right? You could just see everybody just happy.
Right. And Vincent and Jody were there. I ran like intelligence streams from Victoria, so I never made it myself. But what I saw was they were going into different camps, the police, and telling them we're going to come on Friday and we're going to arrest you, or we're going to come on Sunday and arrest you. And so they were what they did leading up to the Emergency Measures Act was spend a lot of time trying to break the spirit and the will of the people and trying to induce fear and division. And that was probably one of the most vile things they did in that entire thing, is that we finally had this spirit of peace and joy and love and everybody's happy again. And this is what Canada was supposed to be like. And now we've remembered, and they did everything they could to break that spirit. And that was vile.
Yeah.
Right. I think we've missed one point that we haven't brought up yet this evening, is why we're really here. Like the message that we're really trying to convey, other than just rehashing the story, is, just how bad this is, that it did happen to us. But if it happened to us, it could happen to you. It could happen to your viewers. And I have to say, that is why we launched the civil suit. I don't know if you were on some of the calls, Jody. I think you might have been, you or Chris, where I actually said originally when the Mosley decision came out, I said, I'm not interested in a civil suit. I'm not interested in going and suing. Yeah. And it wasn't until I really thought about it, and the discussion was, this can happen again, right? This can happen again. And if we don't sue, if we don't, do something, because you have to look at your options. Like, what is available? What can we do? How do we push back against this? And your options are extremely limited. So it's like, what can we do? Well, we could sue, that's an option. So why not do it? And the answer, first of all, I just don't have the energy for it. I don't want to do it. And I know Carrie's the same. and I'll tell you, most of our plaintiffs are just exhausted. But it came down to it can happen again, and it can happen to other Canadians, and they'll all be victimized. And just imagine where this can go. Let's face it, that line always gets pushed further and further and further. And if we're going to acknowledge and say that the line is now here at this new position, and that's okay, and then it'll just get kicked a little further.
Yes.
And that's okay. No, we need to stand up to that. And so how do we do that? We're saying, if this could happen to us, it could either happen to us again, or it can happen to you. It could happen to your listeners. It could happen to any Canadian. I don't care which side of the spectrum you're on. You could be a transgender, woke, fully tattooed and pierced, ultra leftist, and then find out that one day you're going to get a procedure or go do something, whatever it is. And you're being denied that. And then all of a sudden they're going to freeze your bank accounts because you said or did something the government didn't like. Right. And you're going to be shocked. Because, the government you may like today, or you might love the Liberal government, great. You might absolutely hate the next government that comes in.
Right.
And so we have to have something in place that was established that says, no, that's already been done before. And boy, that didn't go well for the government. So you really don't want to go down that path again, right? So we have to establish those parameters and pull that line back. So we're doing this for all Canadians.
Right. And the scary part is that we thought we had those safeguards in place. And then we found out those safeguards meant nothing. And so, like, how do we rebuild that as well? And these lawsuits are, building that wall one brick at a time. And, and so that's super important. I have a question. Does your legal defense include full disclosure and find out how exactly you were targeted?
Oh, it will. And that's the beauty of the civil suit. You see, it's not just about reaching a verdict at the end and saying, yeah, the government did it wrong. It's, okay, here's what we need now. We're going to need this and this and this and this. And there's a very high likelihood of getting everything that we're going to request, because that's the way things work in civil suits. The disclosure process is completely different than in the criminal process. So yes, there's going to be a tremendous amount of information that will be requested, that will come forward. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of dispute. So you really need to appreciate the fireworks show that's going to take place, because you're going to have the banks pointing the finger at the police, and you're going to have the police pointing their finger at the cabinet,
right?
And the Privy Council, and everyone's going to point the finger at everyone and say, we didn't do it. But ultimately, if you go back to the statement of claim and you read the statement of claim, the manner in which it was written, you're going to see that they all colluded with each other. They all worked together to make this happen, and they all cooperated. And this is a conspiracy, that they all work together, and they work together not just to crush us, not just to shut us down. They took our information and they passed it all around the globe. Our personal information went through financial institutions all around the world. And where did it end up? We don't know. We have no idea how far reaching the repercussions are. What's going to happen if I ever fly into Australia or decide to move to another country, or spend a lot of time there and go set up a bank account somewhere, and all of a sudden my name's flagged for something, somewhere, somehow. It's just unfathomable. And we need a degree of not only transparency on releasing all the information, holding people accountable ensures responsibility by all parties. And I have no problem releasing anything that's requested, because I will be fully responsible, because I am responsible for my behavior and my actions, and I hide nothing. And so we need that as well from the banks. We need that from the police agencies. We need that from the government officials. All Canadians.
Yes, we should care. We should care about this.
We should. We're all supposed to be, or we've always lived under the assumption, innocent until proven guilty. But when they can walk in and literally steal your ability to access the funds that you worked for without a trial, without a hearing, without admission of guilt, and without any criminal charges being laid, that's a problem in a free society, supposedly a free democratic society.
Right. So our justice system operates on the guidance of best practices. And so when you have 5 federal agencies and at least 1 major provincial agency saying that the information we're getting is completely the opposite of what the media is saying and what the politicians are saying, that's your best evidence right there. Your undercover operatives that are among the crowd saying, no, it's not a problem here. Your detailed information providers who get paid a lot of money to work for the government from multiple sources, multiple directions, multiple angles, monitoring and tracking of cell phones, movement of people, over wiretapping, listening in the conversations. and reporting to the head intelligence officer that, no, everything's actually okay, best practices. And you're going to throw that all in the garbage and go, yeah, no, that's not the answer I want. Somebody's going to have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
This is another big warning, like we were talking about earlier, the digital ID and CBDCs coming down the pipe. Carrie, your only crime was parking on the street. That was your crime. Or not you.
Yeah, parking on the street adjacent
It wasn't
was your
you.
crime.
It wasn't your crime. Your
right.
car, it was your vehicle was parked in the wrong spot.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter who was driving it, who was parking it, who was where. Your vehicle was parked in the wrong spot. And for that, the government decided to penalize you and have the RCMP send the banks a letter to freeze and steal your money from you and tell you you can't spend it how you wish to spend it, even though you worked hard for it, even though you didn't do anything criminally wrong, just your vehicle was literally in the wrong spot. So when we talk about digital ID coming down the pipe and we talk about CBDCs coming down the pipe, and there's going to be a day when the government doesn't like what you socially do or socially say, and they're going to deny you access. This has already happened in Canada, and it happened to you because your vehicle was parked in the wrong spot. And they don't even know for sure whether you were there or your husband was there or whether a friend was there. They can't even tag it to either one of your behavior. It had nothing to do with behavior or a person. It was your vehicle was possibly parked in the wrong spot, and that is possibly why they froze your accounts. So this is a giant warning for everybody. One, why funding this lawsuit is super important. Two, why getting your money out of the banks is the next biggest thing you could possibly do from this day going forward.
Right. Or you were just following the police's advice and you left your keys by the front door. You stole your car. You're being a good citizen.
Yeah, another point I want to throw out there, Chris, you had asked Carrie the question earlier if she modified or changed her bank or left her bank or, what process she took. If you were to ask me that question, the answer that I would really have to give you here publicly on this podcast is that I will not discuss anything when it comes to my banking practices. If I tell you, well, I highly recommend this credit union or I highly recommend this institution, well, I'm leaving breadcrumbs for the government to track and follow where exactly I've gone. So I can only say to people, please do not discuss publicly your private details associated to your banking or anything to do with your finances, but definitely have private discussions with individuals that you trust and respect and formulate a plan for such a time as this, that should this happen, that you have made a backup plan or you have a plan in place that tries to secure your investments, your money, your capital, your ability to continue to function and operate in a manner that will prevent government agencies from abusing you, because that's what it is. It's just complete abuse.
That's a good advice. Spoken well from a experienced OPP officer. So yeah, we will heed that advice for sure. Yeah. So lessons learned, though, going forward, we don't know when this is going to move forward. You've already said that. What would you do differently? What lessons have you learned from all of this?
I don't know what we really could do different because I don't really think we did anything wrong. Right. I mean, I'm just a very trusting person. So I've learned kind of, you can't be so trusting. You have to realize that these things are going to happen. These things, well, they've proven now that they can happen, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just research, pay attention. Don't take everything. Don't listen to what somebody says. Do your own research. I think that's important.
That is really important. We do so much research here, and we can tell you after thousands of hours, there's no magic bullet. We just have to work together and not comply with this stuff. And really became about an exercise in them thinking, well, they're doing this only because they felt like they deserved the power to do that, that they have the right to do that. And that's just arrogance and hubris. And so Vincent, is there anything you would do going forward that you would, go into these situations differently? Would you, or are you just not going to discuss that publicly?
So that's a really good question. I got to tell you, that's a golden question. And I'm going to say, for the benefit, hopefully we have some law enforcement agencies tuning into this show. I really wish they did. And if not, maybe you should have invited them. Because in answer to that question, freezing the bank accounts, like a number of other things that took place that weren't even mentioned, it's a provocation. And I'm going to say that imagine you're provoking a crowd, and imagine a response to that freezing of the bank accounts was to take the 25 cents that you have left in your pocket and go into the variety store and buy a pack of matches. And if everybody did that, and you're going to burn the city down, you're going to torch the city to flames and burn it down. But that wasn't a thought in anyone's mind to cause damage, to cause violence. And the manner in which these protesters were labeled or displayed, could have been a very realistic response by crazy, violent people.
Yes.
But we were not crazy, violent people. We don't think that way. We don't have any intention to behave that way. What we do is we start to reflect and say, in answer to your question, I don't plan on leaving. I don't plan on giving up. And so ultimately what happened is, I guess we're just going to lock hands and work together and share what we have and do what we can. So, in my particular case, I had to leave for about a 24-hour period, maybe less than that, about a 18-hour period. I had to go back home, and I had to regroup, and I had a number of individuals there ready to fund me to go back into the game. And then when you go back and you get in the game, you start to find all the individuals who are affected, who are locked out, and you start to help them. And you share what you have with them. You make sure that they have fuel. You make sure that they have something to eat and that they have warmth in this -20 weather. But the government, I can assure you, policing agencies and the government have completely debriefed on this issue. And they ask themselves the question, if this happens again, how are we going to be best prepared? Well, I can tell you that all the Canadians that were there are thinking about that. And they're asking themselves that question. And if it ever came to that, you can bet we've figured out round one. And if we ever have to go back for round two, heaven help us. Heaven help the government. We've done our homework as well. And we are not violent people, but we are loving and we are creative. And in that loving, creative way, we'll kick ass 10 times more than we did last time. Not that we kicked ass. Right. We just showed up and said, hey, this was a great thing. Let's have another great thing. But no, we're not violent. But I strongly suggest the government contemplate this notion of provocation. And one way to alleviate that is have conversation, have discussion. Let's talk this out. No, they didn't want to come and talk. The arrogance, the absolute arrogance of the individuals associated to this from the government, and the arrow points to Ottawa, it points to Montreal, it points to Quebec, it points to Power Corps, it points to the birthplace of these most powerful individuals that work together as a cabal, and in this case, a criminal cabal, and then criminalizing further elements, criminalizing our police service, criminalizing our financial institutions. We can't tolerate this. And that's not the Canada that I ever remember, and that's not the Canada I want to live in. And if it means engaging in conversation with our neighbors to the south, then so be it. But, you know, if we have to trade one tyrant for someone who's less of a tyrant, then maybe that's what we need to do. But we need to try everything we can first to fix this system. And fix it needs major overhaul. This isn't an oil change. This is a complete engine rebuild.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, it's funny because up until Trudeau's Jr., we had always expected a certain amount of corruption in the government, and we tolerated a certain amount of corruption in the government. So we have nobody to blame for ourselves but ourselves. Let's be honest in that. But here they took it to this level now, and we now know how corrupt they are. And they're spies and traitors and grifters, and we now know the level of corruption. We now know that this is a criminal organization, and that started coming out with the convoy. And they had one intent for the convoy. God got it, turned it around, and exposed them. So what we had tolerated it. Like we knew Chrétien and Harper, and before that, like there was scandal after scandal, and we knew that they were somewhat corrupt. And they just took it to this nth degree, so we can't ignore it anymore. They got so arrogant, so hubris, like it was just ridiculous. And now we cannot ignore it, and we can't let it go. And I think they've put the nail in coffin for a lot of governments going forward. So I don't know what's going to come out of it, but my concern, like you, Vincent, is that you're right. They're trying to get us to throw the first punch so they can do something about that. And we have been too smart to take that punch so far. But I think we say Canadians are weak and too polite and whatnot, but I think they're waiting. And I think if you push it, we're nice guys until we're not. And if you push us too far, I think they're going to get what they want. And that's not good for anybody. And we're all just trying to avoid civil war right now.
Right. So we are in this legal action, and that is how we fight back. We do it legally, right, lawfully. And, if your audience wants to be a part of this and participating and helping, we certainly do appreciate your help. This is a very expensive venture. And if you want to help, if you can help, then follow that link, takeactioncanada.ca justice/justice. And all the instructions are there outlining the entire case and outlining how you can help.
Right.
It's even got the option for people to get notifications to keep up to date on what's happening. So when that statement of defense finally comes through, you'll get notification if you click on that dot. So everybody can stay up to date with what's happening as it happens, live updates. And I think it is an important case to follow. This case, Adamson Barbecue versus the Reopening Ontario Act and Public Health, that's another case to follow. Yep. There's some really big cases that aren't just big for the applicants involved. They actually have real weight for all of Canadians. Right. So it's really important, one, that we follow politics, and we actually, people say politics is boring and I want to be involved and I don't really care. But we should care, because it's the politicians that make all the rules that guide our lives, that say whether we can work or not work, or whether we can have $5 from our bank account to buy, a loaf of bread and milk. So we really need to start caring. We really need to start funding. As Vincent, you said, we are legal, law-abiding, law-respecting citizens. The majority of us are. And we want to do this the right way. So you got to use your vote. You got to pull your funds out of the banks to protect yourself. But you also got to use your funds to stop supporting the consumerism tyrants above us, but start using your funds to support your community that's fighting for you. And this is one of the ways that you can use your funds to support the community that is fighting for you.
Right. So, Carrie, safe to say you're involved in politics now?
I am now. Yes. Hard lesson to learn. It was a hard lesson to learn, but yeah, we follow very closely now. Yeah.
Awesome. That's good.
Yeah.
Positive change.
Like you said, it was boring. Before it was boring. It doesn't really affect me. You don't really understand what's all involved with until you start looking into it.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, I'll give you that. Now it's so exciting you can cancel your Netflix because there's never a dull moment in politics now.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe we can run that link one more time, Michael. Again, we only bring up cases that can help all of Canadians, and this is one of those key cases for this. We're rooting you guys. Thanks for coming on. When there's some more forward movement, we'll talk about having you back on, and we can get some updates then and go from there. So good luck. Thank you for doing this for everybody, and hang in there. I know you're exhausted, like you say, but
But thank you for fighting. Thank you for standing up. And thank you for trying to make positive change for all Canadians going forward.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you for those within your audience that are reaching out to help as well.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Well, good night, everybody. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on Monday.
Have a great weekend. And if you know of a protest or an event going on somewhere close by, please join it, get involved, start talking, make friends, connect with your community, because that's what you've got at the end of the day.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.